A recent report by the BBC says the Taliban has captured 3 regional capitals in Afghanistan. To talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, we mentioned this before. As U.S. troops pull out of Afghanistan, the Taliban is gaining even more of a stronghold.
Yeah, this is no surprise, right, Hal? So even before the announcement was made that the U.S. will remove troops and withdraw from Afghanistan, we knew that the Taliban, their presence there was causing suicide bombings and so many terror sprees daily, all over the country. So I think the decision wasn't made on the fact that, okay, we finally have stability and peace in Afghanistan, but to what end or how do we stay there because we can't solve this problem. And the U.S. has tried to sit down for a ceasefire with the Taliban. It hasn't worked. So in the meantime, the U.S. troops are withdrawing, and the Taliban are, relentless. They're not even, allowing like to skip a beat and to allow, them to fully withdraw and then to go about their business. They are just pounding and really taking over major areas. So they've made major gains in the north. That's where they're starting, and they're trying to make their way through the country, and that's exactly what they will do.
Now, there's a report that an Afghan Air Force pilot was killed by a bomb blast in the Kabul district, an attack claimed by the Taliban. Now, Lisa, the sticky bomb attached to his vehicle went off, and officials say the blast also injured 5 civilians.
Yeah, this is sad. This is a young pilot who was trained on U.S. jets and quite talented, and had been working for about 4 or 5 years. So he was new on the job, relatively speaking. And this was a bomb that was targeted to kill him. This is a very symbolic attack because, as we talked about, the Taliban is going on this rampage, and they're taking out civilians, and they're taking over cities, and they're taking over provinces at a time, and making major announcements as they go along, trying to flex their muscles. But when they can make the announcement that they killed a pilot, I mean, in any culture, particularly in the Middle East, somebody who's been trained to fly US jets is very well respected in the military. So this is a very symbolic attack. It's one individual, although 5 others were injured with the bomb that went off. It's a very symbolic statement, and the Taliban came out right away to, of course, take responsibility for the attack.
A former senior UK military commander is warning that Afghanistan may once again become a base for international terrorism. General Sir Richard Barron's described the withdrawal of troops as a big mistake, and we may see more terrorist attacks in places like Europe and possibly here in North America.
Yeah, perhaps. And my first reaction to his statement is like, of course, duh, right? We know that they're there. We know that they obviously are interested in expansion. Any terror group that we've seen in the Middle East has only expanded in size and in territory when Western influence or presence is less. So we call that, the political vacuum that exists. So they take advantage of it and they grow exponentially. We saw this with ISIS, we see it with Hamas, we see it with Al Qaeda, we see it with the Muslim Brotherhood, and of course we see it with the Taliban. So this is no surprise. His comment doesn't come as a surprise. Uh, but the surrounding countries, many of them are in turmoil, and the ones that aren't are in defense mode, like Israel, for example. So I think that we're dealing with a region that has always looked at Afghanistan as a terror headquarter, and now it's only going to get worse. It's not news, but it's going to get worse.
Any chance that the Biden administration officials may reconsider pulling out troops, especially now that the Taliban is gaining such a stronghold, Lisa?
Yeah, that decision would have to be made if the initial decision was made on the fact that everything is peachy, so we're going to leave. They knew that this is what was going to happen. So I don't think that their decision or there are any new facts being presented for them to step back from the initial decision to withdraw troops. So both arguments make plenty of sense. You also have to look at the other side of the argument to say that so many men and women, young Americans have been lost, in that war and have been killed, to in a war that has had no end. Meaning, what is our bottom line for Afghanistan? What can we accomplish by being there that would justify the risk of having men in uniform, women in uniform on the ground there?
According to Hamas, 69 of its Palestinian and Jordanian members were sentenced by a Saudi court recently to prison terms ranging from 3 to 21 years, Lisa. This is in connection with men arrested 3 years ago accused of being affiliated with a terrorist organization.
Yes. So Saudi Arabia is ironically very, very, very harsh and hard on in the terror groups that it doesn't agree with. And of course, Hamas, being a splinter group of the Muslim Brotherhood, is on the terror list for the Saudis and therefore a no-no. And these individuals were allegedly rounded up and arrested 3 years ago because they were fundraising for and recruiting for Hamas, which is not allowed. So the Saudis, they'll partake in terror activities as long as it's not on their own soil. So you see them involved in a proxy war, for example, in Yemen. But when it comes to their own borders, they want to keep terrorism out, particularly when it's a group that they're not funding. Hamas, of course, is funded by the Iranian regime. And that is the major fight. And the fight for balance and power in the Middle East is between the two powers, Saudi Arabia, the Sunni power, and the Iranian regime, the Shiite power, going at it with their different proxy wars in different places, but they will fight each other's terror organizations. So, of course, Iran supporting Hamas is not going to be tolerated by the Saudis.
Israeli aircraft bombed Hamas sites in the Gaza Strip over the weekend. It was in response to balloons that were launched from a Palestinian enclave. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is more of the same. We saw the flare up between Hamas in Gaza and, of course, the Israeli IDF at the end of May for quite a long time. We had a ceasefire, but you see the results of the ceasefire, and nobody talks about this. We're not seeing any widespread media coverage about this, but we will if Israel should retaliate on a larger scale and begin, wide range retaliation across Gaza. These are extremely pinpointed targets that they're hitting in retaliation or in response for the relentless fire balloons that are being sent into Israel. When you look at what their goal is, obviously they're doing damage. Obviously, they are burning acres and acres of land in Israel. But their goal is to say, we're here and we're going to continue this. They're not just doing this in Israel, they're doing it on the streets of Canada and Europe and the United States as well. Just last week in New York, they had an intifada parade to say, we're not even going to stop at just getting Israel. We want all Jews gone. And
Wow.
when you look at the root of the problem, it's quite serious. And I think the media should be taking a much more serious look at this. It's not just a color war, or taking the side of the underdog, which they believe is the Palestinians. This is provoked by much more a real theory of genocide, and not on the part of the Israelis. Don't be fooled by the mainstream media. It's on the part of this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic force that wants not just Israel gone, but all Jews gone.
New Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, Lisa, is blaming the government of Lebanon for the recent rocket attacks fired from within its borders, even if Hezbollah was the group that ultimately fired the rockets.
Right. So, this has always been an issue for Israel because it has had a relatively decent relationship with the government of Lebanon for many years. But they also know that Lebanon is going through a huge crisis right now. They're reinventing themselves as protesters on the streets because they have a terror problem, because they have a governmental problem, because they have this chaos. And the point of Israel blaming the government is to say, look, you need to curb this influence of Hezbollah within your borders. We understand that it's a cancerous, presence that they have there, but you need to help curb them, and they shouldn't be using Lebanon territory or to be launching these weapons into Israel. They shouldn't be there, and to have the confidence that they have such access or proximity to Israel. And for that reason, Naftali Bennett is saying, we look to you, Lebanon, and we're watching you, and you better do more to curb Hezbollah's influence there.
The large surge of illegal migration by Cubans to the U.S. continues along the Florida shores. Lisa, it's fueled by an economic crisis exacerbated by the pandemic, increased U.S. sanctions, and cutbacks in aid from its Venezuelan ally, which is also suffering.
Yes, it's total chaos in Cuba, as we saw so many people take to the streets, and we had one official from the State Department tweet to say that it's because of COVID that they're doing this, and so many Cubans, American Cubans, particularly in Florida, who are either recent migrants or have fled to the United States because of their parents' stories, were very upset by this comment. They want the world to know that the people in Cuba who are fleeing, who want to flee, who are protesting, who are expressing their disenchantment, it's not because of COVID or the economy solely. Obviously, that's going to be the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. But it is the government. It's a socialist government that doesn't work, that doesn't provide for its people, that doesn't make sure that COVID is handled properly, that the economy is handled properly, because the government is not run in to benefit the people, to let them, prosper and grow and live with freedom and with opportunity. And these are all, of course, capitalist ideas that they are against. So the people in Cuba are really at wits' end, and many of them are taking to the seas to come by boat to Florida, to the shores of the United States. And as we know, the Biden administration told them very, very point blank, do not come here. This is not a migrant group that they're interested in taking, even though our southern border is currently open to millions, and the numbers that the U.S. cannot absorb. But it's really a very, very hypocritical place that we're at in terms of U.S. Immigration policy. But really, our hearts go out to these people who have come to the place where they're willing to risk their lives, their children's lives, to get into a boat in tumultuous waters to get themselves to freedom, to safety, to a better life.
Yeah, very sad to see, especially when many of those boats collapse and you see so many of the refugees in the water. Now, Lisa, the United Nations, along with various human rights groups, are pushing the government of Zimbabwe to prosecute a guy who married a 14-year-old girl. Tell me more about that.
Yes, I mean, it's wonderful that this story is getting some coverage, that the UN is speaking out about it. But to me, it was like, oh, well, why did they pinpoint this guy in Zimbabwe when this is happening all over the world in different places in the Middle East, in Africa, where it's cultural. It's absolutely cultural and absolutely accepted. Not only to marry a 14-year-old, but to have multiple wives who are underage or of age, or whatever may be, or to mutilate them so that they don't experience any enjoyment or pleasure from sex. It's absolutely astonishing what the cultures in these places are. And then you see the woke crowd talk about how women have it so badly in the West. So it's an eye opener, and I'm glad that the UN is making an example out of this guy. And I hope that more human rights groups focus and flash a spotlight on these very important topics, and to really popularize this to stop this trend, to really save these young women from this horrific plight.
Espionage between Taiwan and China has grown a little more sophisticated because of fewer people to people exchanges and more use of cyber tools. The relations between the two countries remains quite tenuous.
Yes, there's a few different parts of this story, because first, yes, you look at the tenuous relationship between these two countries, and how it's becoming extremely heightened, and the Biden administration is getting involved, obviously taking sides, and supporting any enemy of China at this point, at least verbally. But I think the more important point here is the sophistication of the cyber tools that China is working on. And I think that that is lost on a lot of people, because, in the United States, in Canada, whenever we experience a cyber attack, it's more that we're on the defense. We're saying, wow, how did that happen? How can we harden these soft targets? But we don't harden the soft targets before it happens. And not only that, we're not, obviously, we don't have any reason to go after these other countries with cyber attacks. So we're not working on our cyber capabilities. And for that reason, we see that China will, and will continue to surpass us. Other rogue nations as well, like Russia, like North Korea, like Iran, they also are spending their military funds on cyber capabilities, because they understand that that is the warfare of the present and the future. And that's something to really focus on, and to really to say, where are we, and can we combat this threat? If that's the new battlefield, then we need to come prepared, and we need to at least be able to combat or to speak up to what they're doing.
Lisa, wildfires continue in many regions across North America, including where you are in California and in Canada and BC, one province over from us. Thousands have also fled a Greek island as wildfires continue to rage on there, threatening thousands of people.
Yes, this is horrific. I mean, when you look at these natural disasters and how difficult it is to get people out of harm's way, to contain these fires in the summer heat, and to prevent them from continuing on, it's truly tremendous. I know here in Southern California, there's an issue with homeless people setting fires because they're using barbecues to either make food or for meth, unfortunately, and obviously being careless and setting fires and really damaging acres and acres of land, putting people in harm's way. The firefighters are in harm's way trying to battle these fires, and of course, we have the summer heat and the dry heat here that really makes things much harder to really contain these fires. And in Greece, I mean, they've had so much in terms of a tough time in the past 4 or 5 years, and now add to it this natural disaster that will make it very difficult for them to evacuate, to get people from island to island. It's the logistics of moving people from island to island and to contain these fires.
Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, thank you and stay safe.
My pleasure.